I'm going to do a little Dave Portnoy, everybody knows the rules, one bite type thing here. For you said you're turning 50 this year. I'm 53. I can take the headphones off so you can see exactly what I'm dealing with. I'm giving your hair like a solid 9.3, 9.4. God bless you.
Sometimes the genetics work out. I just am very, very lucky in that way.
The Business of Betting podcast is presented by Optimove, the #1 CRM marketing solution for the iGaming industry. 4 out of the top 5 U.S. operators personalize player experiences with Optimove, the #1 CRM marketing solution for the iGaming industry. Learn more about Optimove by requesting a demo at optimove.com/businessofbetting. And if you like what you see, you will get your first month free.
All right. Welcome back to the Business of Betting podcast. I am your host, Jeff Edelstein. We are here today with Adam Robinson. Adam's been busy. As a member of American Bettor's Voice, he's been busy. As CEO of his own company, I assume he's been busy. Or a couple of companies. Am I wrong on that, Adam? How many companies are you in charge of currently?
Well, one, Hireology is a business I started 16 years ago, and is where I spend my working time, is really focused growing this business and serving our customers. But I don't golf, so as a hobby, I like to publish reports on the gaming industry and talk to legislators and regulators about policy. But I'm weird like that.
Before we talk about that, I am a little curious. So you're the CEO of Hireology, and based on my internet research, it's a company that helps other companies find the right people.
That's right. Yeah, we're a platform that companies use to run their hiring process, and we serve 3 industries primarily. We call about half of all new car dealerships in the United States customers, thousands of hotel properties, and thousands of senior living communities and skilled nursing facilities. So the common thread is businesses where people are the product, generally skilled hourly talent. It's where I've been in business, the last almost 30 years in this space.
So what's fascinating to me about this is that in my covering of this industry, I've talked to plenty of gamblers and plenty of people who enjoy betting and plenty of people connected in one way, shape, form to the industry. And if they are not full-time in the industry, right? If they're, say, the CEO of a relatively seemingly buttoned up business, they don't want to mingle. They don't want people knowing in the healthcare field or whatever that they're also involved in this. Was that ever an issue for you? I'm just curious to why you decided to let Adam Robinson and be out there completely.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a great question. It's the right question. And I do this with my personal time. This is not, daytime stuff here for me, for the most part. And I have been involved in policy in the labor market, in politics, testified in front of Congress on labor policy, and really got the bug for policy work. I enjoy it, particularly in areas where I either care about or have a vested interest. It's interesting to me. And when I had the opportunity to meet Richard Schutz, who's the CEO of American Bettor's Voice, and Spanky, of course, and this is his vision, the conversation was, how can I be helpful? Because I see, as a player, call me a semi-pro rec sharp bettor, if you will, I had the experience post passball of getting limited everywhere, and it really rubbed me the wrong way. I just thought it was an unfair proposition, and your listeners know this situation well. You do well, you get kicked out. And I said, well, this doesn't seem right. And so I just started pulling on that thread, and found myself at Bet Bash a couple of years ago. Had some folks who used to work here in the business go full time in the sports betting business, if you will, with their own teams. And so I started asking questions, showed up at Bet Bash a couple of years ago, met a bunch of interesting people. And the next thing you know, I'm on the board of American Bettor's Voice. I'm the kind of person that if I see something, I'll say something. But if I say something, I'm going to do something. And so that's just led to an adventure. Let's just say it's been an adventure. It's all volunteer and it's all my personal time, but I enjoy it. And I think it's important because we live in a time where it's no longer, to answer your question directly, it's no longer verboten to say you do this. I mean, I just think the mainstream acceptance of this, you've got the culmination of, I would say, a more risk confident upcoming generation Z that, looks at sports betting like sports trading and, what's the difference between a 0 DTE option and live in-game bet on Kalshi? To them, nothing. And so you've got, yet it's funding an increasing share of state budgets with tax revenue from the regulated space. And I just find it fascinating, this intersection of risk and financial markets and sports, and they're all things I'm interested in. So there's my long answer to your question, but I think it's okay to talk about it for sure.
Now, the one thing you mentioned there towards the end is about how Gen Z, and I think I'm a parent of 3 kids, 16, 14, 11, and it's looking at it now through the lens of gambling, right? It's shocking how we have raised inadvertently a generation to come of gamblers, right? From loot boxes to Roblox to, even buying like the little Lego packages and surprise, you get the guy inside. And then on top of that, my son, who's 16, is not interested in any of this stuff, but I talked to him and he says on TikTok, it's just a steady stream of people asking him to put money somewhere, and yeah, it's very interesting how that worked out.
I've got 4 kids, 3 boys, 12, 13, and 16, and our daughter's 8 and wants nothing to do with any of this. But, I say to my wife, like, I am not going to talk about this stuff with our kids. I don't think it's appropriate to be talking about this. It's just not something I want them thinking about right now at this stage in their life. But one thing we've always liked to do is watch the games together. But over the last couple of years, you can't go through a commercial break you can't even watch the pregame show without finding out what FanDuel's odds on an anytime touchdown prop is. So they're naturally asking me questions. And it's kind of like you're talking about drugs or alcohol or sex or now gambling. Like, we got to address this. So you start having conversations with them about what this is and what it means and how it works. And which inevitably leads, well, I don't know if you're a nerd like us, to a discussion about probability. And suddenly my children are interested in their math classes. It's just, so there's like good and bad here. And I think, it's not a parenting show, but you can't help but step head into this topic now because you can't watch a sporting event without have it being shoved in your kids' faces. And, I don't think that's great, but it's not going to stop. So we have to, that's another part of why I got involved with this because it matters. I think it matters to society.
Well, I agree with you. About America's Bettor's Voice, you recently put out a 37-page position paper that I could have done if I wanted to, assuming heavy use of ChatGPT and Gemini Deep Research. I think I could have managed to figure it out. But I think you're about 3 times smarter than me, and I'm pretty sure you did it all on your own, about this, the one big beautiful bill, as it's called, and the 90%, the tax on income, on gambling income, which we don't need to get into heavy detail with. Anyone who's listening understands it. But you really went into the nitty gritty of what it means, right? And, unless it changes, what the fallout's going to be. So I'd love for you just to give me that bird's eye view of some of the key things that you discovered in your research.
Yeah. And then, this all for me, through my involvement with ABV, have been looking deeply at the issue of player limits and fair play and, the ban or bankrupt model, and we've done work with the Gaming Commission in Massachusetts, which I really think is gold standard for talking about this out loud. And so, what happened, Jeff, was I was reading, as I do, a research analyst report on a website on DraftKings. And it was the first time an analyst who I respect, think they know the business, changed their price target on these stocks and cited the tax loss provision as the reason. And I went, that's interesting. Everyone's talking about the impact on the player. But what happens if the players leave the regulated market because of this tax issue? So, I just fired up research mode in Claude, which I say right at the footnotes of the report. Like, I had some help with this, I wrote it, but Claude and ChatGPT helped me source a lot of the information. And I was trying to answer the question, well, what are the range of outcomes of migration if VIP bettors who don't win money but are going to get tax hit figure this out when they talk to their accountant in April? And what happens to all the sharp syndicate play in large volume, kind of low margin professional play, but high volume play leaves? And based on the research, 10% of bettors generate about 80% of the handle out of those 2 categories, and about 30% of handles at risk, which is hundreds of millions of dollars of state tax revenue. And from there, the report kind of digs into why, and what I found absolutely fascinating is no one at the state level, certainly no one here in Illinois where I live, which is probably the highest tax state in the country for regulated gaming. We have a per bet tax in Illinois now. They're trying to put one in Chicago. No one's thinking about what happens if our tax policy drives players more offshore or to this emerging competitive alternative that we're now calling prediction markets, what happens? Well, what happens is it blows a hole in state budgets is what it does. And I cannot imagine why the state General Assembly folks aren't calling their congressional counterparts in the delegation and screaming at them to repeal this thing. It is going to be a problem. It's going to be either a really bad problem or a catastrophic issue. There's no good scenario here. That's the executive summary of why I jumped into it. I just wanted to know what the answer was. Everybody's talking about this is bad. Well, bad for who? It turns out to be really bad for state tax revenue. And maybe that'll get them to change this stupid provision that they put in this bill.
It's just absurd, and it's very easily explainable to anybody. You own a restaurant, you spend $100,000, you make $90,000, you're paying taxes now. It's out of control, obviously. I'm a little surprised, honestly, that it hasn't been. There's enough support on both sides. I'm just a little surprised it hasn't forced its way into some other bill, Titus tried to overturn it. What are your hopes? If this was on a Cal sheet, which for all I know it may be, what are your hopes? What's it traded at these days?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I had it internally pegged my own mental model, probably had this at yes 60. And I think it's probably the favorite to pass. I think what's going to happen, it's going to get attached to whatever omnibus they pass. Shutdown's got to run its course. Everybody has to look strong. That's 7-8 weeks of negotiation over some continuous resolution period. And then at some point in November, after Thanksgiving, maybe hopefully before, this gets attached to the mega bill that has to pass. And that's the real last shot we've got this year. That would be the path. It's going to get attached to that thing, whatever that thing ends up being. Otherwise, this thing is going to have to be retroactively fixed next year. But, the point I make in the paper is if you're in for volume and you know the issue, who in the world is going to roll in $100,000 a weekly handle hoping it gets repealed at some point and it's retro? You're not. You're going to change your behavior on Jan 1. You're going to go offshore where they don't issue W-2Gs, and you're going to go to prediction markets where you get a 1099 and there's no real tax certainty there, but at least you have a shot at expenses deductions and loss deductions there. So, that to me is the path forward. And, we got 60 days to get it done. It's just, before we hit the holidays.
I want to talk about the limiting thing for a minute. As everyone knows, a few weeks ago, Massachusetts came out with their initial findings, which had 0.64% of accounts limited in Massachusetts. I saw that number, and I'm sure that number is correct. Again, I do trust Massachusetts, despite, what their motto is. I don't know if you saw my piece. It's that watching paint dry is actually quite interesting. That's their motto. But they're very good at what they do, and they take it very seriously, obviously. So I have no doubt that number is correct, the 0.64%. However, I do doubt that that's an accurate number in that how many people open an account and never really bet? How many people open an account and betting $5-10 at a time? How many people open an account and they're only shopping for the best price? So what the real number I'd love to know is how many people are limited in Massachusetts who are high volume bettors, who are betting every day, who are beating close. You know what I'm saying? And that number has to be. I don't know what that number is, but it's obviously significantly higher because I'm limited in tons of places. I am not. I was never a volume bettor. I was never a big bettor, but I apparently beat closing line value a few times, right? And just talking to people in the industry who are limited, it just seems like that the number of people who are limited has to, if I had to guess, I guess, quote unquote, serious bettors, it's got to be 10-20% at least.
For sure. And I don't have a figure to give you on that because it's very hard to get it. And ABV was, assisted the MGC in the drafting of the data request and, had a hand in the questions that we asked. And what we're trying to do is say, is positive CLV at the account level correlated to a lower stake factor allowed? And is a negative CLV correlated to a higher stake factor allowed, which just means over 100%, you're in the VIP program? And, Chairman Maynard, you heard him say it this week. The answer is yes, empirically. The data showed that if you are sharp, you get limited. And if you're not, you get higher limits. That's a big deal. That's never happened before. I really, in your publication, nailed it. This was the week. A lot of important things happened. And that was one of those things. From my own experience, observation, conversation, What I would have loved to have seen is the data set that says what percentage of max limit bettors are in this cohort, and what does that cohort look like? Because what you want to sample are the max limit bettors. Max limit bettors with negative CLV are going to get pulled into VIP. Max limit bettors who don't are going to get clipped in days or weeks or maybe a couple of months. We all know that's true. It's not 0.64% of max limit bettors. It's going to be a double digit number, Jeff, and I couldn't tell you what it is, but it's a material number. And I would guess that it is a substantial portion of the handle that is being shoved out of the regulated market because of these policies.
Yeah. Here's an unfair question for you. I'm going to ask you to A, go back in time, B, look to the future, and C, be the CEO of a different company. Looking at where we stand right now today with the one big beautiful bill tax thing, with prediction markets, with sweepstakes, with offshore, with all these, little piranhas biting at the heels of the DraftKings and the FanDuels of the world. Do you think that they kind of wish they didn't go down this European model route and maybe kept all their business coming in?
I don't think so. I mean, if I put myself in the shoes of running one of those companies, I would have this business model because it says the model works. I mean, look at the holds. I mean, they're holding the 10, 13, 15%. I mean, it's a pretty good business. You limit your price conscious customers and you give more to people who, view it as an entertainment expense. And it's chalk around the paper. I mean, this isn't what drives me crazy is this issue of limits is conflated with the issue of problem gaming, and problem gaming is an important issue, but this isn't the issue. Limits are not related to problem gaming because we all know these operators don't limit losing bettors, by policy. And so what I would do, I would have that model. And, furthermore, I'm really stuck between a rock and a hard place. Exhibit A, the state of Arizona, came out proactively and said, by the way, if any of you licensees are thinking about even sniffing at prediction markets, your license may come up for review. So it's basically going, if you want to do business in Arizona as a regulated sports book, I don't want to hear you say the word prediction. We're not interested. So there's a implied threat to pull licenses for review. And so they're kind of frozen. There's my answer. Currently, in the past, yeah, I don't think they're going to date. They haven't regretted it. I mean, the market's still paying 66 times forward gap EBITDA for DraftKings. I mean, the market, even though it's been a rough week for them, the market still sees growth. There's plenty of share for them. I just think they're going to have to think about maybe let this cure a little bit. In 3 or 4 years, when the legal uncertainty settles, you're going to see a musical chairs game, and everyone's going to grab a seat. And those seats are going to live with DraftKings, FanDuel, and maybe one other operator nationally.
Well, so, the question that I ask everybody at this point, where do you land on the future legality of prediction markets as it winds its way to the top courts?
I'm not an attorney. I'm not an accountant. I'm just a guy who is interested in this stuff, and I'm a market participant. I'm looking to other examples where there's been regulatory gray area, but the new entrant has gotten so big that the only way out is to strike a grand bargain and fix the taxation. Jeff, I think of, and these are direct corollaries, but I think about, Uber versus the taxi lobby and the municipalities, right? They fought them until they got too big. And then they struck a grand bargain and cities realized that, oh, wait a second, we tax ride share. That's how we'll get our pound of flesh. Now we have Uber, taxi, medallion values are near zero. You look at Airbnb versus the municipalities. Now that's still going on, particularly in New York, but who in the world wants to pay to sleep on someone's couch? Well, turns out, that was more of a blockbuster Netflix argument. Airbnb's a thing. Strike a grand bargain, they pay hotel taxes and occupancy taxes, and they're allowed to operate. Amazon, no sales tax federally at the state level on things bought over the internet. Grand bargain, you now get taxed on Amazon purchases. Too late, they're already massive. I think the same thing is likely to happen with these prediction market players. And it's because they offer a product that the customer actually likes and wants, with the exception of their parlay product, which I think they'll figure out. There's just too much money in it to not figure it out. But these operating platforms are going to process so much volume. There's going to be too much tied to it, too many jobs tied to it. too much favorable consumer sentiment tied to it. Similar to sports betting post PASPA, like people want it. People want it. And so the customer wants to do it. It's going to get big because it just is going to get big because the customer wants to do it. And so it's going to get big enough to where there's material tax revenue that can come out of it. And my guess is there will be another form of a grand bargain where the federal gaming tax is applied to prediction markets and states are given the ability or have the ability to tax handle process through prediction markets in the state of Illinois. They'll get their money and we have a new competitor. I think that's my guess. I could be very wrong. They could shut it down tomorrow. They could shut it down, and so we'll see. I just think there's too much money in it. There's too much tax revenue possible for this to just go away completely. And I'd also offer up, Jeff, if you want to foil against the move to offshore, prediction markets are a domestic alternative to offshore, if you will. They have a more offshore style product. I think it's a path to winning domestic share of sports betting from offshore operators if you play it right. But that's just me popping off. So that's my take.
Have you been interested in sports betting like since wee little Adam was rolling around, or is this more of a newer adventure for you?
In it seriously, the last 10 years or so. I was more interested in financial markets when I was a kid. And I've been a participant in financial market trading since I was able to open an account and done it, for the last 25, 30 years. So looking at sports betting, if you will, was an easy transition for me because the thought process is very similar. It's very different. I'm not going to say that. Now, by no means, uber sharp on sports betting, but I know what I'm doing. We build models and trade them in some of these businesses I'm involved in. To me, it's versions of the same thinking. It's just probabilistic thinking. It's risk return analysis. It's bankroll management. You don't have a crystal ball, but you flip enough coins that pay 51 cents heads and you lose 50 tails. You get to the point you're like, I'll just flip as many coins as I can. It's going to work out. That's no different. Now, market making is a very different thing. And so, that's something else we're getting involved in, but that's a whole other business. But I think that's really the opportunity for tech startups in this space to provide tooling that helps the everyday person figure out how to be an individual maker on some of these platforms. I think that's the new frontier for tech in gaming.
I'm kind of dazzled by the fact that you're running a completely different business during the day and then partitioning off your mind to do this like afterwards. I know there's not crossover like in time, but as you were talking about the financial markets and sports betting, is there a crossover in the mindset from like the business that you started with Hireology and sports betting?
There are many. I think the first is there's some universal truths in scaling a business that apply to any business. You have a clear vision, you rally and recruit people to that vision, you expect a lot, you have defined core values for your business, you execute the heck out of it, you pick the right markets, you learn, you go. That's no different in any business, particularly any technology business. And then, what we do at Hireology is predict fit. A lot of what we do is say, hey, I talked to Jeff, and based on our model says, based on his background and experience and things he said in his interview, and I'll just run it through the engine and say, we think Jeff is a pretty good fit for this. And here's the score we ascribe to that. We're essentially handicapping your success in being able to be a salesperson or to run a car dealership or to be a nurse or phlebotomist.
I'm definitely the bottom quadrant on all those things. So just for any employers out there, just to know that going into this.
So in that sense, predicting outcomes is something we do. We just do it with skilled labor, but you could do it with wide receivers. It's just different inputs. Honestly. And so the thought process to me is the same. And that's what makes it fun. It's a fun, dare I say, hobby, because it's much more than that. I take this very seriously and we want to be very good at it. But to me, it's the intersection of everything that's so interesting to me. It's people, it's technology, it's growth markets, it's probabilities and math. It's a lot of fun.
Are you Chicago Midwest, born and raised?
Yeah, kind of all over growing up with my parents. My dad worked for the same company for 40 years. We bounced around a lot. So I was born in Houston, grew up in Atlanta, Georgia, and then we moved to Illinois when I was in high school. And I've been in Chicago since then. So I'm I turned 50 next year, if we want a point of reference. We moved up here in 1990. It's a great city. Chicago's a wonderful place. Don't believe what you read about us. It's a beautiful city.
Yeah, it looks awesome. I've never been. I drove through it once at about 3 a.m. on the way out west, but yeah, I never thought it really looks beautiful from like April to October. I'm not sure about the winters.
Yeah, no, the winters keep the riffraff out, and you really got to want to live here if you're here in February. But the summer's it's the best city in the country.
All right, so if you had a choice, you could be an 18-year-old Adam and you get a weekend hanging out with Ferris Bueller, or 50-year-old Adam and a weekend hanging out with the Blues Brothers. What do you choose?
Blues Brothers. I think at 18, I would have picked the Blues Brothers. In fact, everything I knew about Chicago when we moved up to Chicago came from having WGN in Atlanta, watching reruns of the Blues Brothers on Saturday afternoons after the Cubs game. I mean, that was Saturday in Atlanta for me, was watching the Cubs on GN and followed by a rerun of the Blues Brothers.
As a result of, would you say Chicago's not that far off from your impressions from WGN, or?
It's pretty close, to be honest. I mean, that's kind of the vibe here.
That's awesome. You seem like a very smart, learned, serious man, and then I go on Twitter and you got to handle Sigma Squirrel. What's that mean?
Sigma is a measure of standard deviation,
Right.
And that is, you try and whittle away at the edges, you squirrel it away. It's a stretch, Jeff, but sometimes you got to go with what handle's available.
No, I love it. I mean, I started Googling around and, ChatGPT and trying to figure out what the hell it meant. And there, a lot of shrugging shoulders coming back at me, which is good. You stand out there for sure.
Yeah, no, it's an online persona. I mean, I do, my focus is running this business. And certainly I'm, Adam Robinson, public persona is not about American Bettor's voice. That's my online persona that we're talking about.
One quick thing that I find myself bringing up more and more often is how the mindset of a gambler like leads into the day-to-day life that we live, and how like I found that I find myself thinking much more in probabilities than in yes, no, black, white. And I find that non-gamblers are committed to this black, white, yes, no. Find the same? I mean, did you notice that about yourself, or,
You're absolutely right. Back to the question of what are the similarities? I mean, you can't stroll through gambling Twitter without seeing EV. I mean, I look back, I've always thought this way. Like, if I make this decision, will I be right more than I'm wrong? And I've always approached decisions that way. Like, I might not be right every time. I just got to be right more than I'm wrong. Is a mindset that I think serves you well if you're in this industry or if you're starting a business or taking risk of any kind. I mean, entrepreneurship is, I define as a complete lack of understanding of just how low your chances are of having it ever turn into anything. I mean, you're basically going like, I hope this works out. Is the outcome, if it works out, handicapped by my ability to generate that outcome worth the financial and opportunity costs I'm going to incur? Most entrepreneurs are like, screw it, let's do it. They just don't have that filter. I think you got to think about this. Am I going to be right more than I'm wrong? That translates. And you're absolutely right, Jeff. That's gray area probabilistic thinking. That is I think is a prerequisite, because no one ever is right about anything. I think that's a good way to put it, Jeff.
No, I think there's a book in there somewhere for someone to sit down and write where like, how to live life thinking like a gambler, right? Because when you say that, it has a negative connotation. But in reality, I think it's a much better way to, make decisions and to, move on with decisions that didn't work out. As long as if you're right more than you're wrong, then you're doing it.
Which reminds me, I think Annie Duke wrote a book equated, poker MBA kind of approach. I remember it's very good. And along that track, I mean, that it is absolutely an interesting topic. I'd love to see it updated for today's generation, as they say. Yeah.
All right. Well, before I let you go, I just got to say this. For those of you who aren't watching this, the video feed, I'm going to do a little Dave Portnoy, everybody knows the rules, one bite type thing here. For you said you're turning 50 this year. I'm 53. I can take the headphones off so you can see exactly what I'm dealing with. I'm giving your hair like a solid 9.3, 9.4. God bless you.
Sometimes the genetics work out. I just am very, very lucky in that way.
Well, you seem to be lucky in a bunch of ways, and you're doing some good work. And I encourage everyone to check out that paper that you wrote, especially if you do this for a living. It's the meteor headed towards us, this industry. And unless we send Bruce Willis and Ben Affleck up there, blow it out of the sky, I think it's going to be a much different conversation come January. But Adam, Thank you so much for spending a few minutes with me today, and continued success to you, man.
Thanks, Jeff. Good to be here.
The Business of Betting podcast is presented by Optimove, the #1 CRM marketing solution for the iGaming industry. 4 out of the top 5 U.S. operators personalize player experiences with Optimove, the #1 CRM marketing solution for the iGaming industry. Learn more about Optimove by requesting a demo at optimove.com/businessofbetting. And if you like what you see, you will get your first month free.